My name is Indarkment. Some would classify me as a PVMer, and some would classify me as a janitor. We both know who is correct. But there is something that I know is correct. I am a Grandmaster. Today I'm going to explain Maiden at 3 different levels, in order of increasing complexity. I'll be using superfluous vernacular that makes me sound smarter than I actually am. If you need it, definitions will be in the description below. Now, Maiden is the first of 6 rooms within the Theater of Blood, but there's a good chance it will be your last room if you fall into the first category. Maiden has a tornado attack that deals magic-based damage. At random, she will throw blood spots at players that have the ability to turn into walking blood spawns. At specific intervals, she will also spawn crabs, which could also be classified as healers. Medic! Players will often freeze these crabs and gun them down with a blowpipe or the swing of a scyther. Some crabs will be frozen in what is called the clump. This allows mages to use area of effect spells such as blood and ice barrage to deal high amounts of damage. Crabs that reach Maiden will heal her for double their remaining HP, as well as increase the damage of her basic attack, so you want to fully kill them in learner teams. Jagex didn't tell us, but there's actually a 24th skill in old school RuneScape. It's called swimming. Drowning in blood, as some players call it, will deal high amounts of damage to the respective player, heal Maiden, and have a chance to spawn more blood spawns. Praying Mage, killing crabs, dodging blood, and freezing pesky blood spawns will typically be sufficient to complete Maiden and make your way on to the next room. One of the great things about Maiden is she can be completed by learners, but there are nuances at every skill level. Introducing the intermediate explanation. Now that you have the prerequisite Infernal Cape purchase, you should understand the terminology required for this portion of the video. At the intermediate level of Maiden, we introduce time-saving mechanics. We often see teams enter Maiden with a T-bow shot in full void. This is because it is essentially free damage while running a marathon to Maiden. We also introduce better defense reduction as the level increases, often having a player BGS after hammers are hit. This is essential for a mechanic I will discuss later. Majors at the intermediate level often have a much better grasp on ideal freezing procedure, with the South Mage catching S1 and S2, while the North Major typically catches N1, N2, and clumps 3 and 4. This skill set is very important in order to reliably skip 30s. Jamie, see if you can pull up that video. Now once we got a nice little stack of crabs sitting all pretty, we introduce yet another mechanic. The ranger of the team will typically use chinchampas to kill the stack, instead of the majors like we saw in the Cheese Cape click. Maiden has an ability to reduce her stats, so players might need to sip a super combat mid-fight in order to stay topped up. Also, remember when I mentioned that defense reduction is essential for something? This is for skipping, which is freezing the 30% crabs and then killing Maiden. The rationale of this is, why put resources, time and damage, into killing the crabs when a well-coordinated team can instead allocate resources, time and damage, into killing Maiden, allowing for faster runs and conservation of supplies. Once you skip, you never go back. Another reason why players are able to skip at the intermediate level is because players often bring Venges or Thralls, which allow for an increased amount of damage. On top of this, Maiden having a lower defense level from adequate defense reduction in conjunction with a possible Dragon Claw spec allows for a very consistent skipping ability. We also see a possible Crystal Halley spec at around 5 to 10% HP for that last hit KO potential. The intermediate level really does revolve around the skipping mechanic. But more times than not, there's an appearance of better fundamentals and understanding of ticks. There are ample opportunities to miss ticks at Maiden, whether that be from dodging blood, heat-seeking blood spawns, or running some tiles to kill a crab. But enough of that boring stuff, let's get to the best part. Drawing from what we already know and applying this information to the unknown allows us to take Maiden to the next level. Many of the concepts in this category will be taken from the intermediate level, but to the extreme. Previously, we looked at skipping. Let's take it to another intensity. Introducing stacking. In RuneScape, We like to stack things to get massive XP drops. The best XP in the game comes from this idea. And stacking at Maiden is no different. It's the grouping of many NPCs and using area of effect attacks to deal massive amounts of damage. Somebody realized, instead of spending time killing the clump, much like 30 skipping, why not redirect the damage to Maiden after proccing 70s? This will allow a team to stack both the 70s and 50s crabs into one massive clump. Remember when we discussed that the ranger would throw Chinchompas at the clump in the intermediate level? Well, it's the exact same thing here, except it's better. You see, Ice Barrage is only able to hit 9 targets at once, whereas Black Chinchompas are able to hit 12. So the stack has both 70s and 50s crabs, then Black Chinchompas are going to have the highest damage output. But in order for this to work properly, everybody needs to play their part, which is why we need to rewind and start from the beginning. Exactly like the intermediate level, players will begin with an entry T-bow shot. The special attack order, however, is much more specific. In order to reduce the time between 70s and 50s, players will be using their claw specs, which is why non-mages will start off with a Warhammer spec, followed by the mages using the BGS until the defense is close to 0. Mages will be at maximum T-bow range and won't need special attack. They will be occupied freezing. This also introduces a new theory or concept. We know ranging is good DPS at Maiden, but the scythe is better overall. So why do the mages use the T-bow? Well, for one main reason. When shooting the T-bow, arrows have a projectile travel time. Using a simple algorithm, we can determine that a T-bow shot will take 3 ticks to travel from the player to Maiden if standing 10 tiles away. This allows mages to continue to attack Maiden but not activate the crabs immediately. It's essentially delayed damage. If they were using a scythe, the attack cooldown would not be ready to freeze the crabs. Speaking of freezing crabs, to execute stacking correctly, you have to freeze perfectly. And the North Mage has 0 room for error. They will take care of the previously mentioned N1, N2, and clump 3s and 4s. South Mage is responsible for freezing S1 and getting S2 into the clump, as well as possible backup if the North Mage is late to freezing N1. There's a lot to it, we're not done yet. What about the non-mage players? After using their Warhammer spec, they will be constantly venging off prayer, as well as summoning thralls through Spellbook Swap, a spell accessed through the Lunar Spellbook. Now, I briefly mentioned that Maiden will reduce your stats, so in order to prevent this, players tanking Maiden must flick their gear to circumvent this obstacle. Bringing in extra super combat isn't ideal because inventory space is precious in high level teams. As soon as the 70s crabs spawn, the non-majors dump their claw specs to spawn 50s as fast as they can. Optionally, one player may choose to wait and use a Din's Bulwark special attack to hit the stack as well as the grouped up solo crabs. You still with me? Good. After the whole stacking procedure, Maiden continues as normal. Non-majors will venge off prayer as much as they can and remain flicking their gear. But once 30s spawn, skipping is back into action. Because higher level players are able to lose no ticks, flick gear and prevent stat drain, have thralls summoned, reduce Maiden's defense to basically 0, constantly venge, and have best in slot gear, they don't need special attacks to skip 30s. A mage may have a claw spec if the BGS hit massive, but even then, a good team will consistently skip 30s no problem. That's the level we are working with.